All right, welcome to the podcast, episode 3 of the Noel Casler podcast. I'm back here with my trusty executive producer, Mr. Jimmy Kennedy. I think he might be celebrating St. Patty's Day today. I don't know. He's wearing a green shirt.
I want to get lucky tonight, no. So I'll wear
Ah,
the
there you
lucky shirt.
go. All right, a
Yeah.
little two live Jimmy tonight.
Oh yeah.
Luck
That'd
of
be
the
great.
Irish. I'm Irish
I
myself, man. So
yeah, some of my family immigrated from Ireland to the United States. Proud Irish American.
same here, brother. County Cork. And I used to spend a lot of summers there growing up and stuff. I love Ireland. Um, it's a wonderful country. And, this day in New York City is usually a historic day. I live right off of Fifth Avenue and I'd watch the parade every day and they would like line up all the buses on my block before they marched. And when I was growing up outside of the city, we would traditionally cut school and go into the city and get drunk on beer.
Only the best. Green beer too, all right?
Well, they didn't let us into bars back then. This was high
Oh,
school. We'd buy it from the delis. But
yeah.
my drinking days are over. But I hope to get back to the parade someday.
Yeah.
So let's get into the headlines. What a tumultuous 24 hours. As you know, I called the podcast a little early. Usually we tape on Fridays, and I was just so angry last night. I wanted to get into some of this stuff because if you remember on episode 1, we were talking about Don Jr. and posing with all those guns and everything. And I said, like, they're building an army. That's what all this rhetoric is that they keep spewing out and that his minions are spewing out. Lauren Boebert just yesterday morning at 9:59 a.m. tweeted a tweet about the China virus.
Mm.
Every time they say like that, some idiot gets it in his head that, Asian Americans are his enemy. And obviously we saw somebody act upon that last night in the most horrific way. So I want to talk about that. What do you think about that, Jimmy?
Yeah, let's get into it. I've got an angle to take with it, but you go ahead and talk about your thoughts. No, go ahead, man.
Well, it's sickening, and it
Yeah.
gets people killed. That's how propaganda works. I've seen this stuff on Facebook just 2 days ago. I saw somebody, you know, sort of in the comments from somebody else calling it the China virus because they heard that somewhere, and she was like,
Mhm.
it's a man-made virus that the Chinese unleashed on us. And, as you know, you follow me on Twitter for the last year, it incensed me every time Donald Trump said the China virus from the presidential podium. I wanted, a reporter to get up and just scream at him and curse him out and say, that is not acceptable. You cannot use a racial slur in such an irresponsible way from the office, from the podium of the president of the United States. And he just said it again at CPAC 2 weeks ago. And the audience stood on their feet and applauded
Mhm.
and people are getting killed now, and it's like 300% the Asian, attacks against Asians have increased in this country just in the last few weeks.
Well, and he was on Fox News last night in a phone interview where he was talking about the China virus and how it's impacted, our way of life. And it's just, I cannot even begin to believe the amount of hypocrisy when you look at the GOP. That most of them claim to be pro-life. Yes, I mean, can we both agree on that? The fact that but they advocate for less background checks for guns. If it's a white person that pursues a mass shooting like this and carries out domestic terrorism, it's a mental health problem. They're not a terrorist. And this framing that they use to just sympathize with these people. Why? I don't understand. It's to stay elected and to keep white people comfortable, but it's sickening that it's happening, and we're seeing it on all the major networks too. Same kind of narrative.
I know. Well, exactly. Fox News and stuff. They're fomenting this violence as much as anybody else. And they're doing it because it's an easy way to manipulate people. They don't want the people looking at like what's really happening to them, what's really keeping them down, what's really causing 500,000 Americans to perish in the last year. It's because Trump was worried about his own bottom line and his political future, and Jared Kushner was trying to figure out how he could make a buck off of the pandemic. His first thing was getting his college buddies together on the pandemic task force and figuring out how they could profit from this. And when he realized there was really no money in it, he kind of lost interest, and he said the states are kind of on their own. We're not going to do a big federal program here because he saw there was no money in it. And when they asked him about the with the personal protection. I forget the exact acronym for that stuff, but he said it's ours. Remember when they were talking about like the
Yeah.
protective gear when there was a shortage of it for the nurses? He was like, that belongs to us. He was talking about the
Okay.
government reserves of of personal protective gear. So if there's not a buck in it to be made, they don't care. And if they're going to let people die for their political future, that's just the price of doing business. And now we're seeing that come home to roost. And you know, it's disgusting.
Well, and for it to happen too in Georgia, such a consequential place in the 2020 election, and how they had that runoff for the Senate, which ultimately gave the Democrats the advantage. Think if it went the other way in just one of those elections, we don't get the American Rescue Plan. And consider too, we had zero GOP support for the American Rescue Plan, but 147 out of them did vote to overturn a free and fair election. That should give you full context as to where the Republican Party is in pursuit of, different things.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, that's where they are. They're about sort of, manipulating the base. Mitch McConnell is talking now about he's gonna if they eliminate the filibuster, he's gonna grind everything to a halt. Well, what have you been doing for what do you call what you've been doing for the last 10 years anyway, Mitch? Nothing got passed under Obama. He didn't do anything but get Supreme Court conservative judges on the bench. So I think it's a moment for the Democrats to stand up to this and say we're not going to accept it anymore. We have to change this world because our country is not just dying from a pandemic. It's dying from a disease of, you know, disaffected white supremacist terrorism, and we need to start calling it for what it is. The media has a nice way of writing headlines that sort of excuse these people. The law enforcement in the South, I don't know if you caught that press conference today, but the sheriff basically, the Atlanta sheriff came out and was like, yeah, he was having a bad day. I talked to him and it was about his sex addiction. So he was trying to eliminate the massage parlors because they were a temptation to him. Well, what about the 1,400 strip clubs in Atlanta? Do those get you going at all? Not that he should attack them, but my point is, no, he was targeting those places because they were Asian-owned businesses. Let's call it what it is. It's racially induced violence. And that's not something that they want to sort of put into writing, especially the Southern law enforcement. They're sort of covering for this guy and covering for the MAGA crime and the hate that's been fomented from their local congresswoman, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I guess she doesn't represent Atlanta. She's North Georgia, but
Yeah.
it's the hotbed of political divisiveness, Georgia. And it's ironic that it happened in Georgia again. I mean, it seems like everything's coming out of Georgia.
Well, and I know that this is primarily concerning Asian Americans, but you talk about the importance of people of color and what they did for this country. Turnout in Philly, Detroit, Atlanta, predominantly cities made up of people of color. Stacey Abrams by herself was able to register 800,000 voters in Georgia. So for that work to be put toward, and the Democrats actually have the advantage now, we have to actually use it and use that platform to try to accelerate hopefully a progressive agenda, hopefully continue that momentum.
Let's hope we can. I mean, let's hope we can. um All right. So we covered the Atlantic shooting. At the same time that was happening, Trump was making robocalls, right?
Right.
He had his phone banks calling people up last night and saying, donate money to Trump so he can continue the fight. This is an emergency call. President Trump needs your money. Okay. So what's your first thing? What's your first thing wrong with that? He's no longer president, right?
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
he doesn't need your money. You don't need to send him your relief check because that's what that's about. Trump knows those checks are starting to hit people's bank accounts. They started late Friday night, right? I
Mm-hmm.
guarantee you he is fuming that he is not getting a piece of that, because and that's what those calls are about. He's saying, send me your money. Send our president your money. He's not your president anymore. He doesn't need the money. He's not fighting anything except for the SDNY in New York, or the New York AG, who's going to sue him for tax evasion and inflating the price on a house up here. Which is near me, by the way, Seven Springs. It was a house he bought for $7.5 million, I believe, in '95. And then 10 years later, 9 years later, he said it was worth $280 million. Okay. I live in a town that's got about 6 or 7 billionaires. All right. There's Bill Gates has got a place here, Mike Bloomberg. There's a lot of big rollers in this town, right? None of them have a house that's worth $280 million. There are no $280 million homes in Westchester. But he just wrote that. On his tax, on his financial statement to increase his wealth. And then of course when he goes to pay his taxes, he's probably saying it's worth, $500,000. So, it's a scam. It's always a scam. And that's what he's trying to do now. He's trying to scam some of that sweet, sweet relief cash for himself. Like, look at the dog thing. They had a dog show this weekend. Lara Trump has pumped $2.5 million into Mar-a-Lago in this charity that she has, a dog rescue charity. First of all, Trump hates dogs. Okay. He
Mhm.
hates dogs. I've seen the way dogs react around him. They bark. When Trump is around and there's like a bomb sniffing dog or like a
Yeah.
service dog, like a well-trained dog, they freak out and start barking at him because they know he's like a bad seed. You know how dogs can sense evil?
Oh yeah. Well, that was one of the things that I noticed about Joe Biden and his dogs. That's one of the major differences when you just look at them. That it's dogs can sense evil. You can really tell a lot about a man when when a dog reacts poorly to them.
Exactly. Dogs and children, the way dogs and children react, you can tell because they sense fear and they sense like the discontent of the soul. There's that famous gif of the like bald eagle, attacking Trump on his desk. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, I have seen it. Yep, absolutely.
That's a real thing. And he also did he attacked the eagle attacked Trump again by the elevator
Yeah,
that
right.
same day.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's insane. But it shows you who he is and his character. So anyway, my point of that is like he doesn't care about dog rescue. Lara Trump doesn't care about dog rescue. They care about getting money into Mar-a-Lago. And there's a report today that they want to set up Doral. This was in the Washington Post. They want Doral to become a casino. Trump Doral, the golf course down
Oh,
in
I think I
Miami.
did see that too. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, I did
exactly.
see that.
That's a good idea, huh?
Well, I mean, based on his history in Atlantic City, we know how that went, right? I mean, the whole town has to fail in order for once his businesses start to fail, he brings down the whole town with him.
I know. And that's what's going to happen down there. But the flip side of that is like if he's into money laundering, it doesn't matter if they fail because the money still gets cleaned. And South Florida right now, he's already got about 10 Trump towers down there on South Beach and they're all full of Russians. So giving him a casino down there would just be another excuse for him to launder money and do all kinds of nefarious things. It's hard to believe we're even still having this conversation that this guy's walking around free and able to do things like that.
Well, but I was thinking about it today because, for right now, the Republican Party belongs to Donald Trump. I think that's fair to say. Uh, but he's really been kind of a useful idiot to the GOP for a majority of the time that he's been involved in politics. From you mentioned the amount of judges that he got passed through. He got two judges on the Supreme Court. I mean, Mitch McConnell is more of a concern to me than Donald Trump because, fortunately for us, Donald Trump's an idiot. We notice how dumb he is when it comes to policy and understanding the difference between cause and effect. What's going to happen if a guy like Josh Hawley, assumes the presidency? A guy that knows better and is consciously making these choices. You know, like that's when it gets really concerning when we have folks who are educated and are making these decisions uh, in favor of white supremacy.
I know. Well, that's the problem right now. The clock is ticking. We have about 2 years, and they're doing their best to to pass all these voter suppression laws. Any state that has a Republican governor right now has got legislation, before their houses to pass voter registration law. You got these gerrymandered districts already that keep sending people like Jim Jordan back to Congress, Ted Cruz. So, you know, you're right. You have 2 years, and you have, 4 years, 3 years now until the next presidential election. Get a Tom Cotton in there and see what happens.
Mm.
Get somebody with some self-discipline, get a Ron DeSantis. DeSantis is like Trump with a law degree. He's just as corrupt. He's just as mean. He's just as disgusting and piggish and like doesn't care about like showing his corruption in plain view. Right. I mean, he vaccinated like a whole town in Key West that like donated $250,000 to him, and all these guys got the vaccine before anybody else. Like that's a Trump move, and he's like, what are you going to do? Stop me, So when one of these guys, takes over the office, you won't get it back. I'm surprised we barely got it back from Trump. I mean, I don't think people realize how close we came to, disaster on January 6th. The whole thing could have been over.
Yeah, and we still have congressmen that took tours, in the Capitol. The full investigation still has to unfold, but I never in this point in my life did I think that there would be a threat to American democracy, but it's fragile, it's fragile. And 10,000 votes, that was the difference in Georgia, like as much as it was a different comparison in the national vote from state to state, it was very close. And I think people need to understand just how important it is when it comes to those voter suppression laws. Again, you mentioned it. For every one of those that gets passed, that's less and less votes that are going to be in favor of Democratic candidates.
Absolutely. And that's the plan now. The people who voted against us, let's make sure they can't vote again. And like you said, it comes down to 10,000 votes in Georgia, whatever. It was 77,000 votes in the 2016 election. And now we just found out yesterday in the DNI's report that the Russians interfered again and that they gave anti-Biden propaganda to the GOP and the GOP used it. People like Ron Johnson disseminated that information, which is designed to disrupt democracy, to make it not a free and fair election, to favor one candidate over the other. And the GOP gladly went along with it, just like they did in 2016. Obviously, Trump won 77,000 votes in 3 states, in a handful of counties where they were able to target guys, that had voted for Obama last time, but that also, joined the NRA and listened to Kid Rock or, whatever it was that they were able to micro target. And that's what Jared did. He'd gone to Harvard. He had buddies out in Palo Alto. Right. And he called up his friends in Silicon Valley and he said, how do I micro target these people on on Facebook rather? Because that's where all the conservatives are. Let's be real. How do I find these guys on there? And then they just started hitting them with propaganda. Hillary's going to take your guns. Hillary's running a sex operation in a pizza parlor. All this wild stuff, and it works. And it worked on women too. QAnon is a great example of that. They exploit people's already existing psychological wounds. They act like it's this big thing against pedophilia. They're finding people that were probably victims of pedophilia. I mean, that stuff doesn't discriminate, but if you do psychological profiles, which the KGB does, they know that they can go into these counties. They're targeting these white counties outside of Michigan or whatever. They know what kind of issues are going to push these people's buttons. And then they design the propaganda to exploit those. And they're able to turn them into like warriors for their cause. And I was on a show on Friday night. I think you saw it, Zev Shalev's show, and right, Narrative. And this woman, this brilliant young reporter who writes for MIT for a publication out of the Massachusetts Institutes of Technology, was able to get an interview at Facebook. They don't let anybody in. They're like a secret society, but she knew how to play it, and she got in there and she said, look, they're building AI, basically algorithms to create white supremacist militias. on your platform. They're basically using the psychological warfare to turn out soldiers by targeting them with disinformation. And when she brought it up to Facebook, first when Mark Zuckerberg heard about it, he was like, don't talk to me about algorithms again. He didn't care because all he cares about is expanding his reach. So he wasn't concerned at all that there was a public health concern, just like he didn't care a few years ago when people were getting slaughtered in Myanmar because of Facebook and disinformation. It's all about the bucks. And that guy's a Bond villain if you've ever seen him. Have you ever seen one? Like his haircut alone is like, nah, dude. Like, but
Yeah.
anyway, so it's effective, and it was already proven effective, in one election, and possibly, I don't believe like Lindsey Graham won fairly. I don't believe McConnell won fairly, like in this past election. McConnell's got like a 30% approval rating, but he wins again. You know, Lindsey Graham won a county that had always voted Democratic in North Carolina with a high like Native American population. And all of a sudden he wins the county in the last election after being a villain, for the last few years. So they're using that information, and they're using other ways to obstruct people from voting and to manipulate the vote counts and the totals. And people have been ringing the warning bells for years, and it doesn't seem like anything ever gets done.
Well, and it's a really interesting question now in the 21st century. What's more important or more valuable, I suppose, information or disinformation? You know, it's hard to kind of distinguish. Thankfully, I went to communication school. I went to journalism school to look at when was this recorded, where was it recorded, who's recording it, what angle is it recorded from, all of those things that we should learn about internet literacy. And there's a great documentary on Netflix that talks about how disinformation is really just continuing to enclose people's echo chamber to the point that they're only hearing what they like as opposed to what's dangerous and what will threaten ultimately their way of life.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that happens to us on either side of the aisle. No matter where you fall on the political spectrum, like there is such a danger in only hearing your own point of view. I don't mean hearing like the whacked out like QAnon point of view, but hearing this sort of single sourced information that's written online and designed to get you angry. Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I can go on Twitter, I can be having a nice day. I'm out here looking at the birds. I'm playing my guitar. I get on Twitter. Within 10 minutes, I'm raging. Within 15 minutes, I'm tweeting. And then people are, retweeting me, or they're commenting, yeah, right on, or some people are just being contrary to get attention. And, and I block them or hide them. But my point is, it's not healthy to have that diet. And it's not news. Like there's so many self-appointed journalists on Twitter, it drives me nuts. My uncle was a journalist. He was a managing editor of Time magazine and Fortune magazine, and won a lot of awards. He was nation editor for Time and New York magazine and all this stuff. And like real journalism, like you said, it's three sources. It's painstaking reporting and facts. And now people can just write an article and appoint themselves, you know to be an expert, or an arbiter of what is good. And it's dangerous because it's not an official source. And that can also influence politics in a negative way. People get really caught up in these videos now that everybody makes, and then the people who make the videos become very popular and a political force unto themselves. And then they endorse a candidate that perhaps isn't well vetted. And all of a sudden, everybody's already made this candidate so popular that his opponent can't run against him. That scares me too. How much of like politics is now based on social media and clicks and how many followers you have on Twitter. It shouldn't be that way. Most of the politicians I admire in life aren't like big social media people.
Well, and I've had conservatives that I know, complain to me, when's Joe Biden going to call a press conference? He's too busy working, trying to fix the country right now. The press conferences that Trump had were to promote his own businesses or use his medical knowledge to say you should inject bleach to cure the coronavirus. Like
Exactly.
maybe it's not a good idea to have the president be spewing what he thinks is going to happen. Let's have the medical professionals and the science lead this thing, because we've seen where presidential leadership, at least with 45, get you, you know.
Exactly. He was using his press conferences for the My Pillow guy, you know. And remember when he had him in the, in the Rose Garden, and he would have guys from each corporation get up and give a few minutes talk, and it was
Mhm.
all about genuflecting to Trump. They'd get up and be like, "This guy's the greatest leader I've ever seen." And I'm glad you brought that up, because in the beginning, this time last year, he wasn't holding the press conferences right away. He was scared in the beginning. If you remember, the first like COVID press conference he had after like everything had to shut down and we realized the economy was being shut down, and schools and banks and everything were closing,
Right.
he slinked out of the room. He did one in the press briefing room and it's like, all right, I'm going to leave you guys to it. And he just lumbered off, you know, backstage. Right. And then these other guys spoke, Dr. Birx, Dr. Fauci and stuff. And then Trump realized, like, wait, everybody's watching this stuff because everybody's home and can't go to work. He's like, I
Mhm.
want some of that. And then all of a sudden it was every day. For months, he was having a press conference, and they got increasingly more like batshit crazy. You had the drink hydrochloroquine and the drink bleach and inject all this crazy shit because he was trying to one up himself, and it became like this must see TV, right? Every Sunday night, he would give this 2-hour rant and insult a reporter, usually a female of color or something, and he would do these things knowing that he was sort of participating in a reality show, and then he changed his mind. Then he realized, like, I'm bored, let's open everything up, let's open it up by Easter. And then he kind of just faded away again, until he could do his rallies. And it's insane. So you're right. Biden's working. Like, Biden's got money in people's bank accounts. He's gotten more people vaccinated in the last 3 weeks than we probably did in the last, 2 months before that.
Unreal.
Everybody's getting every two of my family members texted me today. They got vaccinated. A buddy of mine was like, do you need vaccine? I can bring people, like I'm bringing my company to get vaccinated and stuff legitimately, like he's like, they asked me to bring more people because they have to use the shots, they're perishable. But speaking of that, there was another story where Trump Tower employees just got vaccinated. His tower in Chicago,
Mhm.
apparently the whole staff got vaccinated, and they shouldn't have been vaccinated. There was a program in Chicago where it was designed to help at-risk communities on the south and west side of Chicago, and somehow Trump's employees at the posh Trump Tower Chicago all got vaccinated, and now the health department is trying to figure out how that happened.
Well, I mean, the exploitation and Trump. I mean, that's synonymous. He's going to try to exploit the system he has with the tax system, Lord knows. And I was thinking about the press conferences that he would call, right? And he worked closely with Mike Lindell about trying to get hydrochloroquine or some other kind of substance to be like a mineral. You would buy it at a vitamin shop. It's all for profit. It's all in an effort to make money or to hurt people. It's a sadist kind of behavior that we saw in those press conferences.
Yeah, well, he is a sadist. And he bought a bunch of doses too this time last year. I mean, we don't have to rehash all this for listeners, but remember when he had the government buy like 4 million doses of hydrochloroquine queen? Like, what happened to that? Where did it go?
Yeah, if there's some kind of benefit, maybe he has them stored somewhere,
Yeah,
but
exactly. Or he made a buck off the selling them.
what was the substance that he was on that made his hair grow? I forget what it was.
Oh, that's Regeneron, I think. No, Regeneron was what he got when he got COVID.
Pisha? It was some P.
Propecia?
There we go.
But I
That's
think
what
that's
it
a
was.
disease. He's on all kinds of shit. I mean, most notably Adderall.
Well, and people in the GOP are saying, how great he looks, and it's
Oh
like
my
he's
God.
got a band-aid where an IV would be. Like, come
Oh,
on.
he always has. That has been as long as he's been president. That's back to Celebrity Apprentice. They're always giving him fluids, because his kidneys are shot because he does so many drugs. Your kidneys get all messed up and you get dehydrated. The guy only drinks Diet Coke. You know what that does to you to only consume Diet Coke? He doesn't drink water. I mean, you've seen him try to drink water. It's an athletic event, you know. It's an Olympic workout. He needs two hands, you know. But
Yeah.
yeah, he looked like death warmed over. He looked like a cadaver in those pictures on Sunday. And you saw that lady tweeted out like, "Look how great he's looking. He's ready for 2024." You know?
Ew, yeah.
No,
And
it's horrible.
and shortly before he crapped his pants, he's like, "It's a bathroom over this way." He's pointing at the.
Exactly. Oh yeah, that's right. You sent me that meme. He doesn't need the bathroom to crap his pants. That's what it, that's what
That's
the
what the
depend.
diapers are for.
Exactly, dude. He just sits there and stares at you as he does it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Also, I was thinking too. He's had the rhetoric of the China virus right for so long. He also said that African nations were shitholes.
Yeah.
Like this isn't the first time he's done this, and in the process, he's turned the United States into a shithole for Joe Biden to try to fix in the
Well,
remaining time he has left.
that's the
You
good
know,
point. He wants to like sabotage the next guy as much as he can. It's why he fired all the staff the morning he was leaving the White House. He fired the staff, called from Air Force One and fired like the head butler and stuff at the White House. So Biden couldn't get in the front door. You
mm-hmm.
know, if nothing tells you about this man's character, that should tell you all you need to know about the guy. He's that petty, and his wife's that petty too. Melania is a villain in all this. She just disgusts me. I'm sorry, but like, the fact that they both got vaccinated in January and didn't tell anybody, kept it a secret instead of telling people like, hey, get vaccinated. We got vaccinated, stopping a deadly pandemic when you're the mother of a teenager, like to not care about the next generation. I got a friend of mine who just got it last week, right? He
Right.
tested positive last week, wasn't having any symptoms. Friday night, he started getting sick. Went to the hospital Saturday morning. He said by Saturday night, he was ready to meet his maker. He said he was
Mm.
in so much pain. It was so painful and he was having such a hard time breathing. He was just like, if I have to go now, I'm at peace. I mean, that's
Wow.
horrifying to think about that, but to like think he was that ravaged by this thing in that short a period of time that he was like, okay, I might not survive this and I'm cool with that because it hurt that much. And luckily he pulled through and he's still in the hospital and he might be getting out of ICU soon, but it's no joke. And this is in New York City. And I got other people in New York City, they're hanging out again. They're going to meetings, they're going to restaurants, hey, it's over. Why are you still wearing a mask? Like, I'm wearing a mask until the last person gets vaccinated and then some, you know?
Well, I think we're going to have to. One thing that concerns me, as much as I would want, March Madness to go on, the entire NCAA tournament is going to be in Indianapolis and surrounding venues in the state of Indiana. But you're going to have groups of people meeting at bars, meeting at restaurants, meeting in their own backyards, wanting, or at least in their own homes, wanting to watch the tournament. That can't help our numbers here locally, like as much as I want these things to happen, life can be on pause for a little while we get things under control. Like crap has hit the fan, folks, in America, and we need some time to let it get better. We need some time.
That's well said, Jimmy. And you're a sports guy,
Yeah.
and I know, it's weird they have it in Indiana. Like, nobody likes basketball in Indiana.
Yeah, it's not really part of our culture, but yeah, it's a funny thing. Like there's a former coach who coached at Indiana, got in trouble for violations, and he's gonna take his now team into Assembly Hall where IU plays. So it's kind of ironic to see that happen.
Oh, that's
And
crazy.
IU just fired their head coach, so
I
we're
know.
kind of
Yeah.
we're waiting on who's going to be the next person in Bloomington to try to restore that program. So,
That's crazy. Yeah. You sent me that article. I just got my basketball hoop re-put up on my barn today.
yeah.
Yeah. I have a basketball, net and backboard and everything, and it fell down in a windstorm like 2 years ago. And it's way high up in the air in a barn. Like I can't put it up myself. So the workman finally came today and put it back up. It's a big luxury for us. We're real excited to get back out there. It's about 30 degrees now, so I'm not gonna play today, but it's nice to because we got a little concrete area and stuff. So it's nice to have a basketball hoop in your backyard to be able to go out and shoot some baskets.
Oh yeah. And Bob Knight was a big supporter of 45 back when he was still able to make public appearances. He had a the rally that he had here on the south side of Indianapolis, Bob Knight, made a huge speech. And if you're an IU fan, that's a hell of an endorsement. You get all of the people that grew up watching Bobby Knight wanting to vote for Trump once Bobby makes that endorsement.
I know. Well, that's, and, I don't think most people in Indiana needed much of a push to vote for Trump.
They do not, no. But that was the extra push that they needed, I suppose.
God, there's so many, like, I saw this thing of this Aubrey Huff guy. Did you see his tweet? The
I
baseball
didn't see
player,
that.
Nazi guy. Oh, he's just horrible. He's always doing these trolling tweets. I don't even want to talk about him on the podcast. But it was an anti-vaxxer kind of thing. And he was like, come and get it, ladies. Look at this ripped 44-year-old body. And the guy's face looks like he's 65. It was nothing to brag about.
And going back to what you were talking about with the with COVID and Trump and the way he managed it, with the way he managed it. Do you think that he actually had COVID, or was that kind of a something that he made up?
I don't know. I was convinced he had it in the beginning, and I didn't think you'd ever change my mind. But now it swirls into mystery like everything else does around that guy because we never get any information, especially about his health. And Sean Conley was his White House physician who had already lied on his behalf a bunch. The guy looked like he's from Melrose Place, like he's playing a doctor on a soap opera, you know? So I don't know. In the beginning, of course, I thought he had it because there was no reason for him to lie about it. We will get into that now, though, because there's some other things about that. When he got out, that whole thing was Mark Burnett, man. That the way he left and got in a helicopter. Mark Burnett is obsessed with helicopters. That's why you saw him on The Apprentice all the time. There was always live shots in helicopters. Mark was like a special forces guy in Britain, so like it's part of his machismo kind of thing. It's like bikers and helicopters, right? So if you notice, when Trump left Walter Reed, the helicopter, Marine 2 or Marine 1, I guess is the name of the helicopter, it went. I don't know if you know DC well, but Walter Reed is in Bethesda, Maryland, which is north of Washington, DC, where on the northern border where Maryland is, sort of like the northeast part of DC, right? And then Georgetown, and then there's a river, and then there's Virginia, right? And there's the Potomac River. So when the helicopter left, it left right at sunset, the best light of the day, and it took this long circuitous route over DC, right? And flew down by the Kennedy Center and stuff, and then circled around and landed in the White House. That's a staged shot, right? And they had a helicopter following for that shot because you saw it live on TV. It was carried live, right? So somebody had to arrange that. That requires television producers to hire helicopters and cameramen and have live feeds broadcasting this to the networks, patching in the networks for this feed. That's a television production, right? And then he gets to the White House and he rips off his mask and walks inside. But as you saw, when he got up the stairs, he was out of breath. That could just be his hamburger diet and the extra 300 pounds he carries around. So he didn't exactly look like Superman, which was his first instinct. If you remember, Trump wanted to leave the hospital, walk out onto the steps of Walter Reed, rip open his shirt, and have a Superman t-shirt on underneath. I kid you not. That's true. That's not a joke.
Oh,
That
are
was,
you serious?
yeah, that was reported. That's in the Washington Post, dude.
Oh
They
my
had to talk
goodness.
him out of that. He was like, how about I come out and I rip open my shirt and I'm like, I'm Superman. I beat COVID. And they're like, yeah, tone it down a little bit. Maybe we'll just give you a ride of the Valkyries helicopter ride. And, but so anyway, I think it was a staged event is my point. But when he went there, I think he had to have it, but it's such a mystery. And when they gave him all that, like those steroids and stuff. And if you saw when he did remember when he snuck out on Sunday?
Yep.
And he got in the back of that thing. Most people miss this, but when he was in the back of that limo SUV, and he's exposing the Secret Service guys to his disease, he was bouncing around and dancing on the back seat of that SUV in like a terrifying way. It looked like the Joker. I've seen Trump up close and personal in some crazy situations. That was like a new level of insanity. So I was like, what are they giving him? Because you'll see, he's like bouncing and dancing back there, and he looked like a pure psycho. You should look up the video again, because it's worth watching. So they obviously had him hopped up on something, but yeah, it is weird. Like, how did he get out in 2 days? And my friend, who's, 35, almost dies, you know?
Well, and he also benefited from socialized medicine.
He sure
As the
did.
president of the United States, he gets the best healthcare in the world. Yet he tries to end the ACA, right in the middle of the damn thing. I mean, the guy clearly has no care for the common man,
Of course
which
not.
we've seen. Yeah.
Well said. And you know what else drove me nuts about this weekend? He had all his supporters come up and they were standing outside on the road, and they were like beeping horns and like banging cowbells all day and screaming and holding Trump signs. If you remember, they were there from Friday night, like he was their guru. So they're outside the window and he kept like having somebody tweet like, "Hey, thanks to see all the supporters out there. Keep it up. I see you and I appreciate you." And part of his SUV ride was to thank those supporters. So here's the deal. Walter Reed is on one side of the road and NIH is on the other, National Institutes of Health, right? And it's a campus. I've spent some time down at NIH. It's the top research center in the world. It's where Dr. Fauci works. It's obviously, it's where they broke the genetic code and developed AZT, which cured AIDS. Like, it's top level research, right? Part of NIH is a pediatric cancer ward, which is an oncology ward for like the sickest kids in this country, that are basically donating their bodies to science. So somebody else's kid might live someday. They're undergoing very experimental protocols on like highly experimental drugs, to test how it works. So, it might be developed into something that saves somebody else's child's life. It's the bravest thing you will witness. It's one of the most heartbreaking things you'll ever see. And I was there for a month leading up into Christmas about 15 years ago because I was
Mhm.
part of another thing there, another institute they have. And it was heartbreaking. So that whole weekend, when I saw these people making all this noise, all I could think of is there's sick children a couple hundred yards away trying to sleep, undergoing chemotherapy that makes you incredibly ill. They're children. And forget about the children. Everybody else in the building has some sort of disease too. It's a hospital. You don't show up at the hospital like it's a parade for who won the Super Bowl. You know,
Right.
but they did, and Trump encouraged it. And it pointed out the ugliness and the baseness and the lack of understanding and empathy that not only he has, but his supporters have.
Well, and that should also be even more of an emphasis of trying to wear a mask. That there are sick kids that are probably trying to, be a sample to try to provide for the masses, access to quality medicine. Like, we owe it to the scientists to take the public health measures that are in place. There's a reason why it's there. In the last pandemic in the 1920s, the same precautions were taken because a mask is the best thing to do in a situation like that. Like, again, why are we explaining to grown adults that you should care about other people? Isn't that a given? I mean, and they're all, in the name of Christianity, and there's so much hypocrisy there. It's ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
They're not adults. They're not adults. And Trump gave people like the permission to not be adults and to make you feel like you're okay to be that way. As long as you had a flag and you're Christian, it's okay to barrel down the highway in your big pickup truck with, coal pipes in the back, like polluting the environment, and
Mhm.
running old ladies off the road. You see the way these people drive these things? You're going to hear me talk about that a lot on this podcast because it drives me nuts. The lack of civility left in this country it's heartbreaking to watch, and at its extreme moments we get what we had last night. I hate to circle back, and a lot of these podcasts will try to get some humor and some insight and some inspiration, but
Yeah.
this is a horrible thing. Like, I'm tired of mass shootings. How old are you, Jimmy?
I'm 26.
You're 26. Okay.
26.
So, you're not a kid, but I'm 50 tomorrow. Okay. So I was about a little older than you when Columbine happened. I don't remember exactly what year that happened, maybe 98, something like that, 99, 97. You can look it up. But,
Yeah.
I was in my late 20s, and it was kind of like This is the most horrible thing I've ever seen. And hopefully we make sure this doesn't happen again. And, there's a whole generation of people living through, mass shootings now that don't even remember Columbine, and Sandy Hook was in 2012. Like, and I've told you about that. That's about, a half an hour from where I live. Like, nothing could be more upsetting than that. So the fact that these things become, did it say, did you happen to look it
Said
up?
April of 1999.
99, exactly,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
21 years ago, like,
Mhm.
so you were just a baby, like, that should have been done. It shouldn't happen anymore, and now we accept it, we got Stone Marjorie Stoneman, like, a year ago last month, April,
Yeah.
what do you call that holiday? Valentine's Day, people send their kids to school and they never come home. I met some of those kids, by the way, from is it Marjorie Stoneman High School, Parkland, Florida. It doesn't
Oh
matter.
yeah, Parkland,
Right,
Parkland. I
Parkland.
know.
That's the one I mean. The name of the high school is like Marjorie Stoneman or something. I met some of those girls, that organized that big march on Washington. They were honored at the Glamour Women of the Year awards, which happened in New York City before the shutdown. And, they were inspiring, because these are young kids and they're like, they're not going to take it anymore, and we shouldn't take it. Like, this was a kid yesterday who did this shooting. He's 21. I was a child at 21. Like, to be 21 and feel like you're okay to pick up a gun and go kill a bunch of people, like, it just boggles my mind, And have we created that? A society so desensitized? I couldn't imagine ever doing that. Like, if you sent me to a war and said you had to do that, I'm the kind of person, it'd be really hard to do that, unless it was like Nazis or something, like where it was really black and white, But it's just amazing to do that to your fellow countrymen and to think they're your enemy. Do you know how much Asians have contributed to this country? They're as much a part of this country as anything. When you watch these westerns about cowboys and stuff, like, they built the railroads, they did it. It was forced labor practically, but they've been here since we've been here, and none of us are from here unless you're a Native American, So, like, they're not less American than you. They're immigrants just like you're an immigrant in Georgia, whether you're white or not. And
Yeah.
to demonize them is despicable.
Well, and I don't have a lot of sympathy for white people when they talk about, lazy immigrants and how immigrants make the country worse. Well, you are the guys that stole land from the people that were originally here and then used enslaved labor to build your empire. So don't come to them and say that they're lazy. Like, and as far as like what happened yesterday, another mass shooting, it honestly, at 26 years old, I should be maybe thinking about starting my own family. And I don't really want to. I don't want to bring a child into this world if I know that something like a mass shooting could happen at any point. But we're not taking any steps to improve it either, and that's the sickening part.
I know. It's only gotten worse. It's only gotten worse. But, the outrage on the flip side of that is more people have gotten vocal and gotten woke about it, and
Exactly.
no matter what happens, what we're seeing now with Trump and Trumpism, this is a dying breed because hate is not sustainable. Even though there's been racism in this country for over 300 years, and you're right, it was founded by guys that didn't want to work hard. They came here and like, wow, look at all this land. If we could just get somebody to work the land for us, we can sit back in these big houses and make a ton of money and sell this stuff to Europe, and keep all the profits, and that's what they did. That's what the whole model of white supremacy is based on, and then they brought indentured servants over. It's St. Patty's Day. So a lot of Irish came over, indentured service, and they were, one above the slaves. And what the wealthy landowners figured out, it's like, hey, let's get them to resent the black people. And I don't mean Irish people. I mean all the, the poor whites that came here to work. The wealthy landowners were like, we can't let them find out that we're the ones really exploiting both of these people. We're
Mm-hmm.
better off if the poor white workers think that the blacks are their problem, or the enslaved people or the African Americans, like, it's we better have them think that, like, that's the enemy and not us. And that model exists to this day. That's what you see in this MAGA, this Trumpism. They don't want the one percenters, they don't want these folks that are driving around voting for Trump realizing like they're just as screwed as the people that they're demonizing. They're not becoming millionaires or billionaires in this lifetime. The wealth gap now between like the 1% has more wealth than the bottom 90% combined.
Mm.
That's staggering. You're not catching up to that. you know, Jeff Bezos is like, you're not catching him. You're not getting a piece of that money, but they don't want people figuring that out, and that's the Tea Party, the Koch brothers. Koch brothers were billionaires that did business in Russia. Their father did business with Hitler. Like, they don't care. It's about like dominating a people. That's why they cut education. That's why they cut healthcare. It's why they don't like abortion, because they want a steady stream of low income people keep being born so we can like exploit you in a factory and you die young. We don't have to pay Social Security. We don't have to pay for your education. So you're not going to grow up and become a lawyer and sue us. You're going to stay in this permanent underclass. And that's the gig, man. That's what these people are fighting to protect. And the most infuriating thing about it is that these other people are signing up for it and they're doing the fighting. They're they're fighting for their own ability to not have a future, and they don't see it.
Yeah, and the unbelievable thing for me, I mean, as amazing as Amazon is, you can have anything in the world delivered to you in 2 days. It is gross, and I mean beyond gross, that a single person can handle that much wealth and make decisions for that many people. Like, that's power. Money is power. We saw just um, how crazy it can get when you put a person who has ambitions for money, like Donald Trump, in the White House, and then he's able to pull the levers into his favor. And we saw it from his cabinet to what he's doing now, trying to get people's stimulus check to further feed his craving for attention.
Yep. Well said.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, Jimmy, it looks like we've been on for an hour. We got another podcast in the bank, as they say. Anything
All
else
right.
you want to talk about before we go?
I'll go ahead and promote my website. That's all right. jbkonair.com. And if you are on social media, you can follow me there as well at jbkonair, both on Twitter and Instagram.
There you go. Check him out. He's got a great Twitter feed. Check out his website. Check out his podcast. He's got an excellent podcast. He's had me on it. He's had my buddy Brent Terhune on it.
Oh yes, and
Corey the Butterbean or whatever, the buttermilk guy.
yeah, the Buttercream Dream.
Buttercream
Corey
Dream. He's funny.
Corey Ryan Forrester. He's from Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. So for
I, yeah.
anybody that kind of wants the inside scoop on that and how that happened, listen to that podcast.
Yeah, he's got something to. I bet he's got something to say about what just happened too. We should get him on the show sometime.
Yeah, we absolutely can. But
That's
always a
awesome.
pleasure, Noel. Always a
Thanks,
pleasure.
man. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for listening, guys. Another week's rant. Hopefully things will calm down a little bit by next week. It really was a disheartening thing that we saw last night, and we got to stop this, man. We got to come together and we got to stop demonizing the other, because it's just not worth it, man. And it's just, we got to change this place. We're not going to have anything left. So, on that happy note, should I leave them with a joke? I don't even have any jokes for them. I'm working on this new bit. I'm trying to figure out a way, what happens to like, vegans like that live in like, Arctic, like, so I'm coming up with like a vegan food for the Inuit people. It's called Beyond Whale.
There you go. I like that, man. That's awesome.
You're gonna have to
Yeah.
edit that joke out, man. That's about as unpolitically correct as it gets, I guess. Yeah. I
All
just thought
right.
it was funny. All right, brother. I'll see you next time, man. Thanks for tuning in, Noel Casler podcast. Be safe, everybody.